It's not the most exciting topic in the world, but it's something that's relevant to anybody out there in business, especially tradespeople. And it's something that at some point, I imagine we're all going to need. So we're talking about insurance. Now this is a series, we've broken this series down to a few episodes. Today we're going to be talking about insurance that's relevant to tradespeople aside from death, long-term injury and those kind of things. So we're covering off on things like motor insurance, public liability, tool insurance, general property insurance. We're talking about the things that we all need to have as business owners. However, it's such a confusing landscape that so many of us think we've got the right insurances, but in reality we don't. And it's really important that we do in the instance that we do need to put a claim through or a claim is put through against us. Even things like workers' compensation and personal accident and stuff like that. I mean, these are all super relevant, guys, and you need to have this. You need to have these insurances in place in order to protect yourself, in order to protect your business, and in order to protect third parties, other people, so on and so forth. Anyway, guys, enjoy this podcast. Please take some notes. There's going to be some links to be able to get hold of the gentleman on the show within the show notes, so you can head across there and you can get them. If you want to be part of the conversation, or if you've got any questions in relation to insurance that you want me to follow up on, then by all means leave them in the comments section wherever you see this come across social media or in our newsletter or whatever it might be. Enjoy the show, guys. I'll chat to you again soon, and I look forward to hearing your comments. Bye. Today's podcast has been proudly brought to you by Tradies Web Guys. Tradies Web Guys work with tradespeople only on their websites and marketing solutions to help them stand out from their competition. Everything from web design through to SEO, search engine marketing, content creation, you name it, guys. It is a customized solution for trade-based organizations, and it's fantastic. Head across to tradieswebguys.com.au/apply, fill in the form, and let's have a conversation.
Giving tradies and contractors around the globe the tools to run a modern business. You're listening to Toolbox Talks from the Site Shed. Now here's your host, Matt Jones.
Jeremy, welcome to the Site Shed podcast.
Thanks, Matt. It's good to be here.
Now, this is a bit of worlds colliding, isn't it?
It sure is. It sure is.
So I had for the listeners and viewers out there, I had a comment in our community the other week from Rachel McDonald, who said, what does everyone think of life insurance and income protection insurance? Do you think it's worth it? And I thought, this is interesting. It's a topic which I think is certainly relevant to anybody in business. One that I think we all tend to overlook because typically it's quite boring. But anyway, I posted it in the group in my network, and I said, does anyone have any good insurance people that might be interested in coming on the show? Bunch of things came back, bunch of people came back. One of them, Dan Blatch, and as a result, he's doing one part of this series that we're doing on insurance. He's taking care of more of the stuff around death and permanent disability, so on and so forth.
All the morbid things.
Yeah, all the fun things. Whereas you're here to talk today, and he actually recommended. He said, we'll speak to Jeremy and Warwick, and as it turns out, you guys do my insurance anyway, so that's sort of worlds colliding.
Correct.
So there you go. So you're going to be talking today a little bit about more of the general stuff, right?
Yeah.
Tool insurance, public liability, or is it personal liability? What do you call it?
Probably would go through tools, public liability, motor vehicles, and workers' comp. Probably the main ones every tradie has.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. And I think, like, fundamentally as well, Jez, just to give you a bit of background, a lot of what we do, a lot of the conversations through the Site Shed are focused around helping guys understand their costs and making sure that, when they're pricing projects or they're setting like their minimum price, they understand that they're incorporating things like insurances and, all these other things that sometimes people overlook. So as much as that's relevant, I suppose fundamentally what we're talking about here is we want to make sure that everyone's protected.
That's
and
right.
We want to make sure their customers are protected, in the event that something, heaven forbid, does happen. So do you want to give us a quick rundown on your business and what you guys do, and
sure.
how you can help?
So at Intertrade Insurance, we're based in Sydney, and we've also got an office in Melbourne, and we've been running for quite a while, probably 150 years of combined experience between all the team. And at the end of the day, we're a broker. So we're there to help the client through obtaining the right insurance. And then if they do need to lodge a claim, we're there to help as well. So we've got claims team internally that help with the lodgement and hand-holding, to say, of the claims, to ensure that the client gets the best outcome when they really need their insurance to step up for them.
So I know in the third part of this episode, we're going to do a bit of a panel with you, myself, and Dan, and we're going to talk a little bit about some of the experiences, I suppose, that you guys come across and scenarios that you guys come across within the insurance game when it comes to trade business owners, things that they can potentially avoid or ways that you've been able to navigate potential problems, so on and so forth. However, I think also in that episode, it'll be good for people to understand the value of using a broker as opposed to, jumping online and finding the first available insurance company that pops up, which is normally the worst.
And to be honest, that's typically how it starts. A lot of tradies, they finish their apprenticeship, they say, need insurance. I heard an ad for GIO this morning on my way to the job site. Ring them up, get a cover note in place, and it's done. But the downside about that is that if you don't review your insurance regularly and make sure you're actually covered, you're going to find that you're going to have issues. You start off with that magical $100,000 turnover, and then a couple of years later, GIO still thinks you're doing that, even though you've got 4 or 5 guys on the road. So if you don't have your insurance updated and correct, it can definitely lead to problems when you do need to lodge a claim, and the day you think your insurance is going to cover you is the day that they say, no, unfortunately, you haven't told us the truth and we're backing out of a claim. So it's very important for tradies to get some advice.
So while we're on that topic, and without going, I suppose, too much into it, because I'm sure we'll cover off more of it when we do when we do our panel, but what are some of the things that typically do need to be updated?
Well, I mean, as I was saying, when they start the business off, it's typically just themselves involved or themselves an apprentice. So each year, the insurer should ask you for what is your estimated turnover and how many staff do you have. Now, that's just to cover your liability. That doesn't take into account all the tools and equipment they may have bought throughout the year, any additional vehicles. So there can be a wide range of assets that need protecting, and the tradie or the business owner might have accidentally slipped their mind at the time, or they've got a cover note or have vehicles insured all over the place. So
Gotcha.
Insurance can be a very big nightmare for a tradie because typically they have quite a lot of insurance requirements.
Yeah.
So
why don't we jump into it? Let's jump into some of the, well, actually, before we jump into it, why don't we talk a little bit, I mean, I'm guessing, are we speaking here mainly to the business owner?
Well, I'm open to how's that. Normally the business owner or the financial controller is the one in charge of making the insurance decisions.
Okay.
And for your average typical tradie, it's normally the business owner that's still involved on the tools or on that sort of sense. So it's our job to try and make their lives as easy as possible.
So does public liability apply to employees?
Public liability is in the business name, but it covers all employees, yes.
Right. So the business would set up public liability to cover their staff?
Correct.
Okay.
Well, technically, public liability is there to protect the entity that's insured. So let's call it ABC Plumbing Proprietary Limited. The policy would be in that name as well.
Yeah.
And it's there that if, say, it's a plumber and they make a mistake and the hot water system floods, the third party is going to be suing the company, not the individual that made the mistake. It's going to be the company or whoever's contracted to them. So it's very important the insurance is in the right name that matches all the licenses and the name on the contracts as well.
Okay. So diving into it, I suppose, where do you want to start? Do you want to start with motor or do you want to start with...
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty easy. I mean, let's maybe start with the basics. Motor is probably the easiest of all the ones, but it's also one that can be done very wrong as well.
Well, I mean, I found this out myself actually, not too long ago, and I luckily I went through a broker, but sorry, I didn't know you did motor, so
that's all right.
But yeah, I mean, we went through we sat down, had a meeting, and there were some super massive red flags there with some of the policies which he picked up on. I would never have picked up on it. So yeah, definitely dive into motor, because I mean, there's no tradies out there that don't need a car.
Correct. I mean, and the big issue as well with motor is that if it's attached to the vehicle, being it trades equipment, jetters or other items, toolboxes, it needs to be covered by the motor vehicle insurer. So a lot of tradies just think, oh, it's on the ute, it's covered under the ute. But if the insurer doesn't know about these accessories and attachments, they're not covered.
Okay.
And that can get tradies into a lot of trouble because they think, oh, it's part of a vehicle, but it's not technically part of a vehicle. No. So a lot of insurers now are thankfully giving a little bit of a break. Some insurers give up to $5,000 for unspecified equipment covered on the vehicle. But if you're a plumber or an electrician, you're carrying a lot more than $5,000 typically a lot of the time.
So does that mean in the scenario where, say, for example, your car got written off or whatever, and you had a truck full of tools, they'll insure the truck, but not the tools?
Correct. So if it's fixed to the truck, it's covered by the motor vehicle. If it's portable, it would come under what we call general property or tools of trade.
Right.
So that's where a broker is already paying difference to advise the client correctly on the policies that they need to have. If you just go direct to NRMA, they're going to say, what do you want to insure? My Nissan Navara, done. Here's the premium, away you go. But there's a lot of red flags that can be popped up on there, and especially with trades vehicles, they can be quite high value in terms of the toolboxes and the racking and all the equipment that goes into it.
No, totally. So what's the workaround for that then?
Well, that's where we have to understand our client. So when we bring on a new client, we ask as much information as possible around what actually is on the vehicle, what's fixed, what's portable, photos of the vehicles if even possible. So that way we can understand how best to protect the client. If you just tell us, oh, we've got 5 Toyota Hiluxes, you're not going to get the right information. But if you break down, okay, you've got Hiluxes, what's on the Hilux, how much toolbox, what about sign writing, things like that. So it's a broker's job to understand and work with the client to get the right outcome.
Does it cover things like, I mean, say you've got your standard truck and you've got all your tools, the basic tools that live on the truck all the time, and then one day you had to take a generator to site and it got nicked or it got damaged or stolen or whatever, blown up. Will it cover things like that, like random one-offs?
Random one-offs are insurance companies' wet dreams because they just simply say, nope. Oh, nope, it's not attached, no. But that's why typically you have to have a combination of motor vehicle insurance and the tools or general property cover. If I can just jump in quickly between the two, maybe, because they do go hand in hand quite a lot.
Totally,
so
there you go.
Under a general property cover, you can get unspecified items. Typically, you might put $10,000 for unspecified, and the insurer will set a limit of $2,500 or $3,000 per item. Now that covers all your hand tools, whatever you can get covered under that limit. So anything over those limits is where you need to specify. So your big portable equipment or your drain jetting cameras and those sort of equipment is definitely over that limit. And where you'd specify to the insurer that you've got 5 cameras, they're worth $10,000 each. These are the serial numbers and things. But where a lot of people can, or that saving grace, that one-off, is that unspecified tools of trade, capped up to $3,000, can cover quite a lot of that little portable stuff that comes on and off the vehicles quite a lot.
Is theft the main thing that you see insurance claims, or as a result of insurance claims?
Yes, definitely. Especially some trades industries more so than others. There's a very high theft rate of just equipment. They'll leave the vehicle and they'll just take the equipment.
Right.
But also some of this equipment, if it's involved in a car accident and it's on the vehicle, it's going to get damaged and it's going to get shaken up and sometimes needs to be reviewed and repaired.
Yeah, of course.
So theft being the main one, but also just general accidents.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good point. I mean, like lasers and things that need calibration, they just get trashed. Yeah.
Correct.
Okay, cool. So when we're talking about motor insurance, it's important that the guys out there, first of all, they're getting the right insurance for their vehicles or their fleet of vehicles. But second of all, they're making sure that they're detailing what's going on the vehicles, what's going in the vehicles.
Correct. It's actually very important. And the other thing is, and this is where some tradies get themselves into trouble, to save, $50 or $80, they don't take hire car options. Everyone thinks, I'm not going to have an accident, don't need hire car. But when you do, being a broker, we've got access to be able to put those tradies back into a ute or a van that they need to. And there's specific companies out there that have racking involved and things like that. So the tradies can just pick up the vehicles and carry on day-to-day business. If you don't have hire car, we simply say, well, you can't get a replacement vehicle. Right now at Christmas, your vehicle could be off the road for 3 to 4 weeks. Yeah. Because the panel shops are closing this Friday and they don't open until mid-January.
Right.
So definitely don't take the risk. Just pay the extra money and get hire car.
And actually, that's a good point. so we're talking about money, and typically when people go for insurance, like I know, and I'm sure I'm no different, but I mean, people always shop around and they always try and find the cheapest price.
Absolutely.
What I learned in a podcast I did not, going back probably 18 months or so ago, is that it's very often price is the cheapest price is the one you want to be going for. So what are the things that you should be considering with a policy for your motor vehicle that isn't necessarily focused around the dollar?
Well, that's right. Well, as I was saying, via a broker policy, all these extra bells and whistles, we tend to get them thrown in anyway. You get your hire car, excess, your cracked windscreen, you don't have to pay your excess and all those sorts of things. But with a lot of the direct insurers, these are all optional extras that aren't automatically included or do come at quite a cost.
Yeah, gotcha. All right, what's next?
We'll probably just touching quickly back on that general property tool cover. So we covered the basic items, but yeah, it's very important that these guys don't think that's just covered on the vehicle, especially if it sits on the vehicle but it's very portable. It does need to get the right cover. So that's definitely where using a broker to work out getting the right cover for these items, because we've had clients that take $80,000 bits of equipment on the truck and then it goes into a property. And the big issue is a lot of these insurers will exclude theft in the open air. It's a big exclusion. So if you leave your tools on site, go have lunch, come back and your tools are gone, you don't have any cover. So it's very important to know the fine print and or have less conditions or exclusions possible. I mean, with some insurers that we have access to, we can remove that theft in the open air exclusion. It does cost a little bit extra, but at the end of the day, if you're paying an extra $100 and it actually pays out your claim of $5,000 or $6,000, you're not going to remember that $100 you were whining about. So sometimes, yes, insurance will cost more, but you're going to get actually more value for your money when you actually do need to make a claim.
Yeah, I think that's really important that people understand that as well. I mean, I know I've worked in companies before where probably exactly what you're talking about. We had like a super expensive Atlas Copco generator that we took out on the side, and it was locked up, but it was in the open air. I don't know the terms. This was going back when I was an apprentice, but anyway, the insurance didn't cover it. Probably for the same reason that you just said. Even though it was all had the padlock on the thingy to stop it from all that, and it was all chained up and stuff. But anyway, it got nicked. Insurance didn't cover it, and it must have been worth $50,000 20 years ago.
Right.
It was a huge. And they just didn't understand their policy. That was the bottom line. I remember that clearly because they were like, no, this is covered. It's here. And the insurance guy's like, well, hang on. You opted for this. That means that it isn't covered,
Unfortunately, you do hear a lot of these stories, and they're the ones that end up on a current affair. And you just say, if they went to a broker, they probably wouldn't be in that situation, sometimes. So, yeah, it can be. Insurance is a very fine game. It's all about the fine print, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And fine print and tradies, they don't always go well.
Well, no, that's true. Well, I mean, I know even myself, I was like, Jez, just what do I need to do? What do I need to sign? Just send it to me. I'll sign it.
Yep.
So I suppose there is quite a big responsibility and obligation, from you guys that you get it right as well. Right?
Correct. And at the end of the day, a broker's job is to look after the client, and that's what we have to do. So
in terms of general property insurance, does that mean, like as an example, I go out and I buy, a brand new Hilti drill? Do I then have to contact my insurance company and say, hey, I've just bought this drill, I want to include it in general property insurance?
Yeah. So that's where the unspecified general tools of trade limit can be very handy. I mean, we typically, depending on the size of business, start from 10, 20 or 30 and just give a blanket cover. It covers any item up to $3,000. And if the whole truck got stolen, they would get $30,000 or whatever it may be.
Okay.
So, because otherwise, every day you'll be buying a new bit of equipment and updating. Right. But definitely for the big ticket items, yes, you have to let your insurer know.
Okay.
Anything over $3,000 or $4,000, depending on the policy, you've got to let them know.
So that's certainly things like you said before, water jetters and, drain cameras and all that kind of stuff.
And some of the calibration systems for electricians and things
Yeah. All right. What next?
We'll probably get into the big ticket item, which is everyone's favorite, public liability.
Okay. So what is public liability?
Well, public liability covers the insured for any personal injury or property damage they cause to a third party. So in general speak, if you have a ladder and it knocks over and breaks your neighbour's window, that's covered under a liability claim. But similar to all the others, there is a lot of terms and conditions and fine print that goes along with it. And the typical one that gets people into trouble is the dial before you dig condition, which you'd think's pretty standard, but in every policy, there's a dial before you dig condition. And if you don't get a dial before you dig, it's report done before you dig, it's game over most of the times with these insurance companies. So it's very important.
So we've got a lot of listeners that are and viewers that are not based in Australia.
Yep.
They may or may not be familiar with dial before you dig.
Sure.
I'm guessing there's probably an equivalent over in North America.
There definitely would be. So dial before you dig is basically a report that you can get from the local government authorities that shows you where all the pipes or electrical wiring is in a property. So that you get that report, and then you can obviously dig between the lines or miss the pipes and obviously not cause any underground services damages.
So in that instance, and I've been in this situation many, many years ago, where we did obtain dial before you dig and we excavated and we ended up ripping up optic fibre, but we were covered.
Yep.
I don't know if that's purely because we had that report or not.
It definitely would have gone in your favour, yes. If you hadn't got the report, the insurer would have wiped their hands clean of it.
Right. Interesting. And so then
they just would have simply said that if you did do the report, you would have seen the pipes. But even though you did and they were there, it's a hard argument, but they're always going to take the easy option and try and wiggle out of it.
Now, the onus in that situation is on the company doing the excavation or the principal contractor subcontracting.
Now, this is a tough one. So technically, I mean, depending on the contracts in place, it should be up to the principal contractor because it's their site. But also the excavator should also be making sure they have one or making sure that they get one before they dig, because if they dig and they cause the damage, they've caused the damage. It's going to be their liability policy that's paying up as well. So the onus is on both parties to make sure that every aspect is taken into account to reduce the likelihood of a claim occurring.
And in what sort of instance, I mean, are we talking like an excavation out on the street front trying to locate a water valve? Are we talking like deep excavation for sewer mains? Like where does it?
It's very grey and it's hard to give you an exact answer, but the wording in the policy is before excavation. So if you're just in the backyard digging a small hole with a shovel,
you're probably okay.
You're probably going to be okay. But if you're digging a metre down, you're definitely going to need it.
Yeah, okay. So pretty much if there's machines involved.
But to be safe, if there's machines involved or you're digging a deep hole, you're going to be always be on the side of caution and just get it. I mean, I'm not sure of the exact costing involved, but I think it's pretty easy and cost effective to get.
So in Australia, the dial before you dig certificate that comes through, you've got to contact the organisation and then they provide you with whatever drawings they have. Is that how it works?
Yep, correct.
And
yes.
you pay a fee for that.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, the other big condition as well is hot works and welding.
Yep.
That's another big one that gets a lot of people into trouble because the policies always have a welding or hot works condition that you must apply to all the Australian standards. Now, some of these standards means that you've got to have a fire extinguisher sitting right next to you. So in some particular cases, some of these little things get missed, but it's very important that the client is aware that their policy requires them to have these things and that if you start a fire, you're not going to be covered unless you comply with all the standards and requirements.
I mean, as a former plumber, that was something that we always had to have available. We always had to have the extinguisher. And to be fair, whenever we were on site, you had your trolley with your oxy and acetylene, and you would always have an extinguisher, and the builder would always pull you up on it.
Yep. Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
I suppose for some trades where it's not always, they're not contracting to someone or they are doing the work, air conditioning contractors a lot of the time, or electricians and things sometimes if need be. But all these things are in every policy. So it's just important for the client really at the end of the day to know what conditions are on their policies. Yeah.
Well, that's exactly right. And I suppose then the onus is on them to make sure that they're communicating what needs to be done in order to mitigate potential, issues
absolutely.
to their team out on site.
Correct.
So, I mean, I know in the past we've done toolbox talks and all that kind of stuff with the staff, teaching them how to use extinguishers and all that kind of carry on. And to be honest, I think for the better part, even site inductions and things like that today, and safe work methods statements and all these kind of things make they kind of make you accountable to this.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So what else is included in public liability?
So public liability, that's the crux of it. I mean, for a tradie, you also get products liability, but typically, depending on their occupation, is not really essential. It's typically the public liability aspect, causing damage or injury to third parties.
So causing damage or injury to third parties, that does that mean in the instance where, say, you were digging a hole down out on the road and somebody tripped over it or whatever, is that also public liability?
It would be, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So public liability, a classic example. I'm just trying. Fortunately, I'm picking on plumbers today, but they really do spring to mind. A lot of the times, if you're doing, let's say, for example, a hot water upgrade, you need to make sure you turn the water off. Now, if the water's not fully isolated or off, and you start to do your tests and you cause the sprinklers to go off or flooding, that's a standard liability claim.
Okay.
Because at the end of the day, the insurer needs to be able to show that you're negligent and caused the incident. So water damage is a big one. Just unlike fire, water actually causes probably a lot more damage in strata buildings and things. Just to give you an idea, recently, NRMA and CGU have all come out. They're part of the same insurance group, and they've said that specifically at plumbers, that they will not cover any water damage claims arising over 2 stories. So your average sort of plumber doing strata work is going to be working more than 2 stories in the building, and therefore this CGU or NRMA policy will no longer cover them anymore. Just simply because water damage in those high-rise buildings can be hundreds or $300,000 worth of water damage that goes off.
So I remember when I must have been a first-year apprentice, maybe a second year, and we were working at a property down in Kirribilli in Sydney, and we were replacing fire hose reels.
Yep.
And so we had to replace all of the fire hose reels in the building. Of course, you pull the old ones off. Obviously, you turn the water off. You pull the old ones off, and then we put the new ones on. And the guy that I was working with, the tradesman, in order to purge the line with air, he left the valve at the top open with the unit off it. And like first year apprentice, I wouldn't know any different. So we turned the water back on.
Yep.
And all of a sudden we see this screaming and we're like, what's going on? And we run over and now coming out of the foyer, it's just this torrent of water.
Oh my gosh.
Like shit. So he runs up the top, shuts the valve off. The water had gone into the lift well. It had flooded the entire lift.
Oh no.
All the electrics were stuffed, but the whole thing had to be replaced.
Wow.
Every floor had to have the cover. Oh my God. It was like $500,000 worth. And I was like a first year apprentice going, oh my God, what is this about? But,
oh shit. Yep, and that's why CGU and NRMA are pulling out of plumber work in that high-rise building sense, because claims can easily hit $1 million just for something like that. And
is that really, I suppose, because the premiums would have to be so high that no one would take them?
Pretty much. They'd have to either price themselves out of the market or just simply put this exclusion in place to make sure that you can't place business with them. And that's the broker market and insurance direct. So that's a pretty big stance to say that basically we are not taking on plumbers.
Yeah, wow. Okay, what's next?
The other big one that tends to get some people into trouble is workers' comp or personal accident, especially around subcontractors.
Okay.
So for the viewers not in Australia, workers' comp is a state-based government insurer normally that mandates any company that pays wages over $7,500 covers their employees for workplace injuries. Now, for all companies, it's mandatory to have, and for sole traders, they have to cover their employees, but a sole trader can't be covered under workers' comp.
Right.
So they have to have a personal accident policy to cover themselves personally. But for any employees that they have, they would be covered by the policy in place.
Okay. So can we just go back and recap on that for a little bit? So if I'm a public liability company, proprietary limited company, I would need to I'd be paying workers' comp.
You would, yes.
But as the director of the company, am I covered with workers' comp?
Yes, you are. Yes.
Okay.
For a proprietary limited company, you are. Yes.
However, if I was a sole trader and I was employing people, they'd be covered, but I wouldn't.
Correct.
Interesting.
And so that's also where perhaps crossover with Dan, who will be talking next about income protection and all that sort of thing, is very relevant to sole traders because they need to protect themselves.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think that's one of the big questions, and I think, to be fair, a lot of people out there are a little bit unsure as to. I mean, there's so many different types of insurance, and to know which ones you need for you. I mean, sure, yeah, you need life, you need death, you need income protection, you need public liability. It's like, well, at the end of the day, look, there's that many insurances. How do you know?
Correct. I mean, we've only touched on a few, but I could rattle off another 5 that some tradies have to have. So,
Right.
I mean, it can be very daunting. And that's another reason, if you ring up NRMA, they're going to say, hey, Matt, we'll help you with your insurance. What would you like to cover?
Right.
And the onus is on you to tell them, the insurance company, what you want to cover, as opposed to the insurance company telling you what you should cover. But just because they can't give you that advice, that's where a broker's role is to say, well, Matt, we need to get you this, this, and this, and this is how much it's going to cost. So that's another big reason why using brokers for business is very important.
All right, cool. So let's talk a little bit about workers' comp because
Yes.
I've certainly had experience with this as a recipient.
Yep.
And it was one of those scenarios where I was out on site and I sliced my hand open and had to go get stitches. And I just went into the hospital and said, I need to get this stitched up. And they said, okay, where'd you do it? And I said, I did it at work. And then around the boss, he goes, no, you dickhead, don't tell him you did it at work. And I was like, whoa, what? So I think obviously people try and avoid workers' comp claims like the plague. Why is that?
Absolutely. Unfortunately, workers' comp is a very broken system. I mean, it has to happen and it needs to be in place, but the insurers really hit home, especially in the trade sector. It's very costly. And if you're a medium or a large employer and you have, let's call it a $20,000 claim, they will build that claim cost into your premium for the next 5 years. So you pay insurance to be covered and then you pay for the claim anyway, in some cases. So a lot of employers would just say, no, Matt, that happened on the weekend. You weren't at work or whatnot, because you're going to get covered anyway via Medicare or your own private health insurance. But if it's a workplace injury and you're a medium-sized employer, the insurer will eventually make you pay back that injury cost.
And so while it's not necessarily an upfront cost, they'll recoup it within
a set period of time. Correct. And then also for the medium-sized employers, that the premiums are adjusted based on the number of claims you have. And you pay a premium. So just to give you an idea, a builder might be paying a premium of $10,000 and then he has claims. Next year it might be $13,000.
So it's kind of like a no claims bonus.
Correct. It's one of those things, you've got to have it, but then when you use it, they make you pay for it again.
So they are almost incentivizing people to not to do the dodgy.
Well, they're not. I mean, off the record, obviously, no, they don't. They, as I said, you've got to have workers' comp in place, and it's really there to cover your big injuries and things, and the things that need to have surgery or that sort of thing. So, I mean, it's unfortunate that when you're a larger employer and you're employing maybe 10 or 20 people, that sure, you pay your premium and you pay based on the number of employees and the wages you have, and then it's unfortunate that the insurer then says, oh, okay, well, you've had claims, so we're going to build it into your premium for the next few years.
So in the instance of a workers' compensation claim, is it you, the employee, that is paying the person, or is it coming out of a fund, out of a workers' comp fund?
It's a fund, yes. No, it's definitely a fund. So iCare is the insurer in New South Wales, and they employ Employers Mutual to administer the claims, but iCare is the one that's eventually paying the claim via the premiums that they collect.
So with like guys out there listening that maybe they're a sole trader and maybe they're looking at putting on staff, does workers' comp become relevant from the day you employ another staff member?
Yes, it is, yes.
Or what about contractors?
Now, this is the very big debate. Some contractors are covered if they're a deemed employee, and some contractors are not. So similar again, if you're a contractor and you're a company, you have to have workers' comp. But if you're a sole trader, and you're a deemed worker, then you would be covered by who you're working for. But then again, if you're not a deemed worker and you get injured, then you could be on your own. So it's important for them to obviously then have alternate cover in place.
Yeah, I imagine that's where a lot of people come unstuck, and just through ignorance more than anything, like not knowing that they had to have, like, what happens in that instance if you're like, well, I don't have workers' comp?
Well, and it does happen. So iCare, the insurer, has a scheme of what they call uninsured risks. And then they would just they take care of the claim. And then they basically say, okay, Mr. Employer, you started trading 3 years ago and you employed your first staff another 3 years ago. Here's 3 years worth of premiums to pay.
Oh, jeez. Okay. So looking forward, what's the best process to like mitigate all this? I mean, when you sit down with, I think everyone out there is pretty much sold on the fact you need to speak to a broker in order to make sure you've got the right cover. But what are some of the questions that they should be asking you and you should be asking them to make sure that you're covering all bases here?
Yeah, that's a very good question. For the broker, we really need to get a very detailed understanding of the client. Now, no client is ever the same. They might have the same occupation, but they do things very differently. So as a broker, the better that we understand the client, the better we can then relay that occupation and business to the insurers to get the right cover in place and the right premium. So if you're a less risky business, then we should be able to get you a less risky premium. Obviously, if it's a higher risk area or there's a lot of claims and things like that, then we need to help the insurers understand or get risk mitigation processes in place to show, hey, the business has had claims, but this is what they're doing to reduce claims and do our best to obtain cover and for the best price we can.
Well, that's interesting. So does that become relevant at the point of trying to secure a policy or at the point of trying to make a claim, or both?
Honestly, upfront is the best approach. The better we understand before we actually have you as a client, and then that way we know how to manage you as a client, and when the claims happen, it's important. So definitely it would be in that stage where we're providing quotes to understand the business, so we can get them the best cover possible.
And so if it comes to the point where somebody does need to make a claim, do they come to the broker or do they go to the insurance company?
If you're using a broker, the broker will help you lodge the claim.
And so in that instance, then would things become relevant like, well, here's a detailed, or here's a ledger of all of the toolbox talks that they conducted. Here's all of their
not necessarily, no, because typically the insurer's taken that into account beforehand. Once the insurer writes the risk and you pay your premium, you have an insurance policy in place. So when it comes time to claim, it's just really helping the client to prepare the claim. So if it's a theft of a vehicle and tools, it's getting a list or an inventory of all the items that were on the vehicle, and then getting a cash settlement for the client so they can then go out and replace those items, or helping them to find a smash repairer to get the vehicle fixed, or a repairer that can actually take a big truck, because not all repairers can take trucks. So it's our job to help the client basically get the claim underway and then get it moving as quick as possible. And then we act as a liaison between the client and the insurer. So the client, at the end of the day, they can just say, hey, Matt, you just keep doing what you do and we'll look after the claim for you as best we can.
All right, cool. Well, I suppose in closing, what are we going to leave these the audience with there? Things they must have, and I suppose things they should be wary of.
Yeah, well, as mentioned, out of all the insurances we've talked about today, the only mandatory one you must have by law is workers' comp.
Right.
But for a business, you'd be crazy not to have all those.
But only if you employ someone.
Correct. Or you're a proprietary limited company. Yep.
Right.
But if you...
Well, that's interesting because I'm a proprietary limited company. I don't have workers' comp. Or maybe I do.
Maybe sometimes your accountant might also help you set that up, because it's a very financial sort of
I definitely do. Yeah.
But
my
as I said, that's the only mandatory one, but you'd be crazy not to cover your liability exposure. You'd be crazy not to have cover for your tools and equipment, and you'd be crazy not to insure your motor vehicle. So in that sense, you really need to have a combination of all covers, really.
Okay. And is there typically... does that normally fall under a bunch of different policies, or is there one policy that can cover everything?
Unfortunately, there's not one policy that covers all. Using a broker, we can help package it together, and then we can use an outsourced funding company called Premium Funding. So they will pay the whole premium up front, and then the client just pays them back monthly to cover all their insurances and workers' comp and things like that.
Okay.
So technically the answer is no. You can't. There's not one product that fits all, but with a broker we can help bundle it all together in a sense.
Okay.
So that you only have to worry about insurance once a year in that sense. Okay, 30th December is coming up. That's when all our insurances expire for the calendar year. We know that, okay, we're going to get an email a month before updating all the facts and figures and any changes in the business. And then we'd have terms issued to the client and options for payment if it's a large premium.
Right, this has been awesome. So we are going to come back for a panel discussion where we're going to talk about some of your experiences. You're going to be joined with Dan. And so we'll be able to get a bit of a, I suppose, hopefully draw on some relatable situations that you guys have experienced and just have a bit of a general discussion around insurance with two different people from two different parts of areas of expertise. I appreciate your time. Thank you very much. Where can people get hold of you, Jez?
Well, they can get me via the Intertrade Insurance website.
Yep.
And you can get in contact us with via there.
So I'm going to post links, guys, to Jeremy if you need to, if you want to have a chat with them. They'll be in the show notes, and I'll invite Jeremy into the Facebook group as well, so you can help with any of the conversations in there.
And at the end of the day, we're happy just to have a chat. If we get the business, great. If we don't, as long as we can give the other party some information that they can take away, and that's a good day's job for us if we can help the client.
I think you're very much running the risk there, Jeremy, of becoming the world's only likable insurance broker, so be careful. All right, listeners, that's a wrap. We'll be back with a future episode. If you have any questions relating to insurance, by all means, hit us up wherever you see this come through across social media. If there's anything that you'd like it to be followed up on specifically, any types of insurance, so on and so forth, let me know. I'll get Jez back on the show and we can run through them.
Sounds good. Thanks, Matt.
Jez. That's a wrap.
Have a good day.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Toolbox Talks. If you're liking what you hear, then you can head across to thesiteshed.com where you can join our community by signing up to our Toolbox Talks. You'll get sent a weekly notification, which is basically a highlight of everything that we've spoken about during that week, along with any other industry news that may be relevant or specific to the trades. If you're enjoying the show, you can head across to iTunes, Stitcher, or SoundCloud, where you can leave us a review. That would be fantastic, and all the reviews get read out in the show. Likewise, if you have any friends or colleagues that you think would benefit from this show and the episodes that we create, then please go ahead and share it with them.